Hello from the National Football Museum. I'm Dickie Felton from the museum's marketing team. Welcome to the 7th annual Manchester Football Writing Festival. Now, usually we'd have the festival inside the museum, but this year we've gone online. We've still got an amazing set of writers who will be promoting their fantastic books. So please like, share or subscribe to this channel to keep updated about the festival. Now today we welcome Melissa Reddy, who is the senior football correspondent on the Independent newspaper. She has written for media around the globe about the beautiful game, and she's written a new book, her debut book, which is called Believe Us, How Jurgen Klopp Transformed Liverpool into Title Winners. Welcome, Melissa.
It's a pleasure to be here. I love the National Football Museum, so this is all a bit surreal.
Have you been here?
I've been there about 6 times, and I pass it quite often because I have to take the train into Manchester to do a lot of work there, and obviously it's right by Victoria, so I'm always walking past it.
Oh, that's brilliant to hear, Melissa. Look, we'll get straight into things. Obviously, this is your debut book. How does it feel to have a book hitting the shelves?
I know it's titled Believe Us, and I know I'm now a published author, so I should have like a variety of all these big words to describe it, but I really don't. It hasn't properly hit me yet. There's an immense amount of pride and stuff because I had the shortest deadline possible. And with the restrictions around COVID and with the weirdness of having so many games in a short period of time at the end of the season, it was actually incredibly difficult to get the access and stuff, which added to the stress of writing my first book and wanted to do a really good job in a limited time frame. So when it came, I think that was the first emotion, just all the things that I had to endure to get it out and to actually, for it to be in my hands, for me to see it. It just made all of that feel worth it, the sleepless nights and just sacrificing my life for just over a month. And then the other thing is sending it to my family and friends back home into South Africa, and their reaction to it was quite overwhelming as well. So I used to, my cousin actually reminded me that when I was young, when I was in primary school, I used to habitually go to the library every Friday. That was my big thing to do. And I'd sit there for hours reading as many books as possible. And I'd always want books for Christmas presents and birthday presents and stuff. So yeah, it's come full circle.
And so could you tell us a little bit about the book?
It charts Liverpool's progress under Jurgen Klopp from just before he joined, the feeling and the state of play. Because I think what happens in football is there's so much short-termism around. It's always, the games come thick and fast, and it's always about what's happening now and what's happening next and who's going to be the next big transfer and that sort of thing, that you actually lose sight of what he inherited when he joined Liverpool. And in the process of writing the book, I actually had to take myself back to that point. I had to revisit those games, remember what it felt like sitting at Anfield, and the toxicity that was around. And it spells out all the little and large details that made ending a 30-year wait for the title possible. And with football as well, when we analyze it, it's so result based, and it's so, this club has to go and spend money and they have to bring in 6 or 7 new players. And the reconstructing of a football club goes so far beyond that. It's about the psychology. It's about leaving your legacy beyond just the playing staff that you have, trying to improve the structure in terms of the setup of how the football operation works, but also in terms of infrastructure, the academy, the facilities, all that. And the book goes into great detail about how that's all come about and about the key players, which is a lot more than just Jurgen Klopp.
The very start of the book really resonates with me because I was a season ticket holder at that point, and I'd had a season ticket for a quarter of a century at Anfield. But although Brendan Rodgers had brought the club quite close to the league title, it, in a sense, still felt a million miles away. I think the opening line of the book, football was no longer enjoyable, no longer an escape. And I think I was one of many fans who felt like that kind of at the time. You talk about some of the great things Brendan Rodgers did at Liverpool, but you also talk about that horrendous away day at Stoke when Liverpool lost 6-1, which was a terrible way for Steven Gerrard to bow out in such a kind of fashion. So Liverpool turned to Jurgen Klopp in September 2015, and there was plenty of other clubs trying to get him.
Yeah, Manchester United had earlier done a long play for him, and actually Liverpool themselves, this was their third attempt of trying to get in front of him and convince him that Anfield was the place to be. Tottenham and Manchester City had also made inquiries to his agent. But he had a long conversation with Ed Woodward about Manchester United. And Woodward read Klopp completely wrong. The sales pitch was very United can be the Disneyland of football. It was all about their financial might, and how they were, one of the giants of the game and always would be, and he'd fit in so well. And if you know anything about Klopp, and if you followed his time at Mainz and Borussia Dortmund, what he is invested in is the emotional pull, the feeling, the passion of the people, of the place, and a really personalized take on football. And this was the opposite. This was entertainment and not football is this amazing emotional connector. And so Dortmund weren't actually scared of losing Klopp to United because they kind of felt that it wasn't right for him. And when Klopp had told them that he was turning United down and he was staying, there wasn't really shock at that. And the contrast when Jurgen is linked to Liverpool, and then his former employees at Mainz are asked about it, and all the guys that he worked with at Dortmund are asked about it, and they're like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I think everyone in the football world sort of looked at it, and you could see why the club and the manager fitted together. And it was imperative at that point for Liverpool to make the right decision, because they had spent so many years chasing and trying to play catch up and having the right intentions, but with the wrong application at times. And Brendan Rodgers is a very good tactician. And I think he showed that, especially at the start of the season, or the start of last season at Leicester. We saw it at Celtic, but this massive job, the massive expectation, the task of ending that title drought, I think came a little bit too early in his career. And you really needed somebody to walk in and not feel that winning the title for Liverpool was this noose around the club. Somebody who was going to remove it, give the players confidence and freedom, and work towards the objective of winning the league title, but without it being something that was just punched in the face of the club every day. And I think the person to do that needed to have a lot of self-belief, needed to be very charismatic, needed to completely believe in what they were saying and getting the players to buy into. And I cannot think of anyone else in world football who would have walked in and made the difference he made. And when you read the book and when you read the players' personal accounts of everything, both prior to him walking in and then the changes, I think you'd feel the same way.
You mentioned the kind of players there. There's some great insights from the likes of Jordan Henderson in the book. How on earth did you get so kind of close access to Jurgen Klopp, his surrounding kind of extensive backroom team, and the players? Because I know journalists always say to me it's so difficult getting close to individuals at clubs nowadays. So how have you managed that?
I think obviously relationship building is such a key facet of our jobs, especially in the modern climate where, like you say, it's getting harder and harder to get access because clubs are very aware of their platforms and the power of it and of the money they can drive with their own paywalls and stuff like that. So your relationship building, but also your reputation plays a key part. They knew I wasn't trying to sensationalize things. They had known my long form writing on the club already, that it was very accurate, quite true. Um, and they knew I'd been there from the start of the journey, home and away. Um, my first interview in the UK that was published in the UK was with Jordan Henderson. We were both so young at the time and in such a different space than we were now. So it was actually our evolution has happened sort of together, just differently still. And I think that helps to get the access. Like I said, what complicated matters was the fact that this was happening with coronavirus, meaning I couldn't actually have any face-to-face contact with the players and the manager. It all had to be virtual. Liverpool were playing so many games at the end of the season. Then they went away to Austria on a preseason camp. So trying to actually find the time to speak to the players, the staff, was very, very challenging. And in the midst of trying to actually write the chapters and then to get the interviews all happening at the same time with deadline hovering above me, it was not very fun. But I discovered red wine is my friend during this process. So yeah, that was helpful.
And there's a lovely line in the book which you write: no fan base deifies the main man in the dugout as vociferously as Liverpool, through banners, in song, and in the manner in which they are tattooed to the very soul of the institution. I mean, it's such a difficult job to take on with that in the background, the fact that you come into this role and you're instantly on this amazing kind of plateau. You talk about when, the frenzy around Klopp's first press conference, there were 35,000 people tracking his private jet as it flew over to Merseyside. And in that press conference, he says he's just a normal guy, or he's the kind of normal one. I mean, were you there for his kind of press conferences and things like that, like the very first one? What was that like?
So when Brendan Rodgers got the call, which was directly after the derby, that he was being relinquished from his duties, we knew pretty quickly that Carlo Ancelotti and Jurgen Klopp had been contacted, that Klopp was the preferred candidate. And the start of the season, fans were campaigning for Klopp. It was Klopp for the Kop, the hashtag on Twitter. And so there was this weird week of just constant excitement over what Klopp could possibly come in and do, how it worked at Dortmund originally. And on the day that his flight was tracked, when he left his home in Mainz, his car was followed. The jet flight radar actually crashed because of the traffic the website was receiving. He comes into the city. Everyone knows that Liverpool home games, the players and staff usually stay at Hope Street Hotel. So it was kind of, wisdom that that's where he would end up. So the streets leading up to the hotel were lined with fans, and the club tried to get him into the private entrance of the hotel, so that worked. But then he goes up onto his, and he's in the rooftop suite, and he goes outside and he can see flashing lights, and he's wondering, where are these flashing lights coming from? Because he's high up, he's like so high up, and there were photographers lying on like the roofs of neighboring apartments and stuff trying to get shots of him. And that day was a complete whirlwind because it was just ceaseless, the kind of, but people wanted to know, okay, so where is he now? What time is he landing? What's next? What time is he signing the contract? And I remember that day, like I could not leave my computer screen because so much was happening. I had to produce so much, but adrenaline was also getting you through all this because this was a massive appointment to cover. And there was very little sleep that night because it all got confirmed late in the evening. And then you had to do all the follow-up pieces about what this means. And then he had to report at Anfield at 7 a.m. the next day for his press conference. And even though I was early, I remember walking in and I was like, whoa, there is no space here. The room was filled. Even the cameramen, who usually are at the back of the room, there was no space at the back of the room. So they had to filter through like down the aisles. Journalists were trying to stand and type because there was no space. People were trying to sit in whatever little patch they could find. And he just had everyone hanging off his every word. And it's so weird because he was panicking over his English. He didn't think he had the grasp of the language well enough to relay his depth of feeling for what he was embarking on. And yet, when you go back and revisit that press conference today, every single thing he says is the right thing and has been enacted.
I mean, there's a lovely line, we have to change from doubters to believers. We can write a new story if we want. It was almost like he was not scared of the kind of past, which I know the great history of success at Liverpool has been somewhat troublesome for managers taking on that job, because there's this clamour to kind of repeat that kind of success. Whereas Klopp seems to just take it in his stride, didn't he?
Yeah, and that was a huge thing for somebody from the outside who'd never worked outside Germany. So, his knowledge of Liverpool was from what he'd seen, from what he'd researched. But for him, externally, to look at the club and think, the problem is they're bound to their past, and their past is now not something that motivates them anymore. It's their hindrance because they're so attached to it and desperate to get back to it. But it creates a fear, it creates anxiety, it creates stress, all of it unnecessary, which will impede players and the staff. And really, from day one when he worked in, and he started during an international break, which doesn't make it easy because you don't have all the players there, but that was his opening message to everyone. We have to just stop. We can be a successful Liverpool if we are the Liverpool we need to be, not the Liverpool of the past, because that is now gone. And you can't replicate that. You can do your own version of that. But in order to do your own version of that, you have to let go of the idea of that past. You use it to drive you, and you use it to remember that you are privileged to be here at such an institution, but don't let it sidetrack you, and don't let it feel, one of his big things was, don't let it make you feel like you don't belong here because you're here for a reason. And Adam Lallana gives some very good detail as to how it was as a player at Liverpool at the time, where you are aware that all anyone associated with the club wants is for you to win the title, and you feel like a disappointment when you lose a few games and okay, it's not happening. And then you go into a Charlotte's, and he said he thinks that when Klopp walked in, the biggest surprise for him was looking at the players and seeing how psychologically shattered they were. And then when I speak to Klopp, I spoke to Lallana first, and then when I did the interview with Klopp, I mentioned that, and he said, yes, totally. He could see how much was wrong in a mental sort of way with the players, the staff, the fan base, and he knew he had a massive job in overhauling that, and he's done it.
It didn't go completely smoothly from the get-go. There's a game you describe, a home game at Anfield, where Liverpool were getting beat. I think it might be Crystal Palace. And the team are losing, and with 10 minutes to go, fans are leaving Anfield early to escape the match and escape the traffic. And rather controversially, Klopp says afterwards, I felt quite alone. So he stood on the touchline thinking Liverpool can still get back in the game, whereas a lot of the fans are walking away. I remember thinking at the time that's a really risky thing to do, to criticise the fans, which is what he did.
Yeah, and at the time it was completely the right thing to do, because I will explain why. But when I spoke to him, and when he reflects now, he thinks, oof, that was actually, quite courageous, because the fans could have said, shut up, just win us football matches. That's what you're here to do. So that Crystal Palace game was his first defeat. Scott Dann scores on 82 minutes, and the Kop empties out, the main stand starts emptying out. And he felt that supporters didn't believe that the players could get another goal. And therein, the players didn't feel and didn't believe that they could get another goal. He always tried to showcase that this was a symbiotic relationship. You have to give each other confidence. It can't only come from one side. And why that speech is instructive, or those words are instructive, is because Liverpool then have a game against West Brom at Anfield, where Divock Origi equalizes to make it 2-2 in the 90th minute. So Liverpool score a late goal. And at the end of the game, Klopp walks over, and supporters stayed to see that late goal as well. So they believed that it could be possible, or they heard his words that he felt alone, and they thought, okay, let's not do that again. Let's wait it out. So he walks the players over to the Kop, arms interlinked, something that's quite popular in Germany, to say thank you to them. That action was derided, widely derided, not just in small bits. Even sections of the club's own fans said it was Klopp reducing Liverpool to mediocrity, celebrating a draw. But as you'll find when you do read the book, one of his core strengths is having the big picture in his head and working towards that regardless of all the noise around it. And he knew that relationship between the players and the fans, one of the fundamental things that needed to be fixed first and foremost, and actions like that would do it. When you go later down the line and then you're looking at, the comeback against Borussia Dortmund in the Europa League, the game against Barcelona in the Champions League final that will be spoken about, Champions League semi-final that will be spoken about for decades. You don't get any of that without him building that relationship, without that start against West Brom where he walks the players over. And I think it's really, really jaw-dropping and eye-widening when you see the intelligence behind all the little things that he did that seemed so insane and out of place at the time.
You talk about the, getting a kind of crowd on side, and the famous kind of line about players, they are mentality monsters. I was reading this book very, very late into the night, and I finished it last night, and late last night, and I actually had dreams about Jurgen Klopp last night, and actually had a dream that I was part of his backroom staff, which was a nice thing to have for a short moment in time. But in terms of the backroom staff, you go into a lot of detail about his kind of wider team. And I had no idea really, the kind of length and breadth of the expertise within every aspect of how Liverpool kind of turn out of a Saturday afternoon. He's got the Globe's kind of finest minds looking at post-match routine, pre-match health, psychology, fitness, throw-ins, even down to what kind of salt they have in the canteen at the training ground. And I almost got visions on reading the book of it being like NASA. It's like this amazing team of people trying to put a man on the moon. But what they're trying to do is get Liverpool to win the league. But it's just fascinating, that insight that you've got from the wider backroom team.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. And when it comes to football coverage, so often we get bogged down by what's the result or, what's happening in the transfer market, that you don't understand or appreciate behind the scenes just how much is going on to help these people perform to their optimum. And the thing with Jurgen is he is always keen to stress the influence of everyone else around him. He has to be the face because he's, the personality. But none of what he has achieved would be possible without the staff around him at Melwood. And Mona Nemeth, who he recruited from Bayern Munich to be the nutritionist, has fundamentally changed the way the players see, understand, and consume food. And that's it's a small thing, or we think it's a small thing, but it then aids everything else. It aids how they sleep, how they recover, how long their endurance and stuff on match days and in training sessions. And then you look at how much attention is paid to their conditioning under Andres Kornmeier. And, the small things, like you said, the throw-ins, which what this tells you as well when you see Jurgen enhancing the team at Melwood, the backroom team, is how studious he is of what's happening in football around the world. Because he knew that the best nutritionist and the best conditioning coach were at Bayern Munich. He waited for the gap to get them, which was the changeover between Ancelotti and Pep Guardiola, and struck. He also went and was analyzing what bits of the game aren't Liverpool maximizing. There's about 40 to 50 throw-ins in a football game on average. So why don't we have somebody teaching us what to do with them? Is there somebody like that? And then he goes and finds Thomas Chronemer. Set pieces, he thinks, too often there's not enough variety, so the opposition can work out your routine. So Liverpool get to never repeating a routine in a training session, continuously tweaking it, slight little tweaks, but they improve so much both defensively and offensively in that regard. And the staff speak about this culture of trust. So he relies heavily on the information of those around him, but he also gives them the responsibility for their departments. And this is a big thing, because when we talk about football clubs and when we analyze results and stuff, we think only of the manager as being the man that came to the decision. And while Klopp makes the final call, he relies on so many other experts, and he really wants to use their advice to reach his decisions. And I think one of the really nice things in the thread of this book is that he hasn't actually changed that much. So he's improved, he's brought in a few new faces, but a lot of the people that work behind the scenes have been there for decades. And what's changed is they now have somebody who tells them they are a big part of the picture. They're not just you're not just kitchen staff, or you're not just the kit man. You are fundamental, you are essential to what we're trying to achieve here. And there's a nice bit in the book that speaks about his office and the hallway that leads to his office. There's this portrait of him, which sounds very self-indulgent, but actually no, it's a portrait of him made up of the names of every single person that reports to Melwood, the janitor, the groundsman, all of that, because there would be no Jurgen Klopp as successful as he is today at Liverpool without all those people, and that's what the portrait symbolizes.
You talk about setbacks, and for all the success in the book, Liverpool becoming champions of England for the first time in 30 years, champions of Europe, champions of the world, but there's a lot of defeats in this book. You talk about obviously losing the Europa Cup final, the European Cup final in Kiev, the League Cup final against Man City, and how Klopp picks the club up after those defeats is remarkable. And the thing which struck me is he always wants to get the players together for a bit of a party, win, lose or draw.
Yeah. So Liverpool do not have any of the success they have now without all those defeats. All those defeats are what shapes this team, what leads them to becoming mentality monsters. That experience, that hurt, all the lessons. And what the manager taught them during those periods is whatever happens, we do it together and we're consistent. So yes, you don't want to have a party after we've just lost the Europa League final, but we all get together to celebrate the fact that we've reached a final, that we've grown, that we've developed, and we show the world we're not on the floor here. We're not going to feel sorry for ourselves. We're going to go again. We'll reach more finals, and we'll just keep coming and coming and coming until we eventually get to the point of winning them. And I remember the Champions League final against Tottenham. Obviously, I was there in Kiev when that didn't go Liverpool's way, but leading into that Champions League final against Spurs, and I've got a very good relationship with Tottenham. I have interviewed Maurizio Pochettino a couple of times, appreciate him so much as a managerial mind. So I had this really great insight into both teams. And I knew Liverpool would win that final because Tottenham had not experienced the pain of losing at that level yet, but also not the sort of circus around it. Champions League final is globally massive. There's so much media that you have to deal with. There's so much scrutiny. The intensity is at its highest. And I knew in terms of game management, in terms of understanding that, because Liverpool learned this very well, it doesn't matter how well you play. It's all about the result in the final. You have to win. It's not about being pretty. And that was probably one of the worst performances Liverpool have put in a major game, but they do what it takes to get them over the line. And that was an evolution that you saw in the team. So those defeats, while they were so horrible at the time and you felt, are Liverpool ever going to win anything, had to happen for them to actually win the biggest things, because it would have been so easy after getting 97 points to sit there and think, got 97 points in the league, more than the Invincibles, more than the treble-winning United side, more than 118 other teams that managed in top English top flight history. What more must we do? Can't live with this Manchester City side, that they're too good. But because they're so used to being knocked down and getting back up again, they report to preseason and they think, no, this is our season. Andy Robertson says, whatever happens, we don't care. Whatever's thrown in our face, we'll deal with it. And we will win the league title this season. If we can get 97 points, we can go again and we can do it. And then obviously on the opening day of the season, they lose Alisson. And yet, whatever happens, coronavirus stops the season in March. And for a while, there's the real threat that the campaign is not going to get concluded and that all Liverpool's efforts would have been, to use the phrase that was thrown around at the time, null and void. But they go through all of it. They take everything in their stride because they were convinced, they were desperate, they were determined that it would be their season. But that psychological state only comes with that knowledge of what it feels like to be the loser.
It's funny. It's funny that the attitude in terms of when they achieve success as well, it's not really kind of dwelt upon for too long, or it doesn't seem to be. That opening game you mentioned against Norwich City, Liverpool were European champions going into that game. There's very little fanfare from the club. I think in the actual programme on the night of the game, there was no real kind of mention of the European Cup win.
Yeah.
I was thinking they just focused on, let's just get on with the league.
Yeah, that was by design. The fact that there was no mention that they were European champions in the program, that Jurgen refused to do interviews. Anytime somebody mentioned it, he was like, oh, that was last season. This is a new one. We start again. No one cares. The teams that were playing against us aren't like, oh, you're European champions. We're going to take it easy against you. We're going to show you respect. So why should we think of ourselves any special? And he is big on that. Even to get him to reflect for this book was actually quite an accomplishment, because he hates looking back. He's always so concerned about, how do we move it forward? How do we keep that hunger going? What more can we look to enhance or work towards? And even when you're trying to get him to speak about the next, so if Liverpool have a big game, that's maybe not the next game, but the one after that, and you try to get him to speak about that when there's maybe an unfancied opposition in the middle, he will not. He will say, we don't play them next. And that's not a ruse or something that he puts on. It's how he operates and how he's got the players to operate. You can only concentrate on and beat what's in front of you. If you get too far ahead of yourself, you lose all those games that you think you're just expected to win.
From a personal point of view, Melissa, how did it feel, having spent so much time close to Liverpool Football Club and Jurgen and Jordan Henderson, how did it feel for you when they finally won it?
It was a real joy for all of them. I was so happy to see Henderson lift that trophy because he deserves it so much. I was so happy to see Klopp there on the stage with his coaching staff, because when you know how much has gone into it, all the fine, small, tiny, teensy-weensy details, you understand how every waking moment of these people's lives have been spent working towards that moment. So to see them enjoy it, to see them finally get it, it was also, for me, I like process managers. So I mentioned Maurizio Pochettino earlier. I really appreciate managers who don't just think putting a trophy on the board is success, who genuinely want to improve the people they work with, improve the place they work, make it better for those coming in, give it something where people look back in 10, 20, 30 years time and think, oh, remember when manager X was there, remember what he did, look at how the training facility looks now, this is because he did this when he was here, all those kind of things. And that's sort of what resonated with me, that in this moment, they deserve everything they're getting, but this is not the end, because there's so many things that have been put in place for Liverpool to have sustainable success.
There's an old saying that if the liver birds ever left Liverpool, then the city would cease to exist. Can you ever imagine a Liverpool without Jurgen Klopp?
It's very difficult to, and you kind of have to, because when his contract is up, he probably is going to take a break from football. I can't see him managing another club when he's done at Liverpool. I think he might go with the German national team if that's a possibility, or he might just retire. He's never wanted to be an old manager. He wants to spend time with his family. But what this man will do until his final day at Liverpool is throw everything that he has into the club. And what that will then do is give Liverpool a platform to succeed even when he's left. Obviously, it means making the right decision in getting the next guy in, and no manager is going to be Jurgen Klopp. So they can't go and try and, comparatively find someone there. They will have to, like they did with Jurgen, what stage is the team in? What stage is the fan base in? How wide is this reconstruction job? Or does it just need a guiding hand, or does it need this, massive charismatic character again? They have to recruit for that moment in time rather than trying to replace or replicate what he's done, because I think when we reflect in decades from now, we will understand the scale of achievement and the scale of influence he's had on this football club.
Melissa, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your amazing book with us. It is called Believe Us, How Jurgen Klopp Transformed Liverpool into Title Winners. It's available on Harper North and it is in the shops from today. A huge thanks for joining us for this special Manchester Football Writing Festival talk here from the National Football Museum. We have a full week of author Q&As, so please check these out on our channel too. To find out more about the museum and to book tickets to visit us, come to our website.